We have that. That's very prevalent in Scotland. We
Mm-hmm.
have, obviously, we all understand that diversity leads to innovation. It brings about success. It's good for organizations. So we all know that and we understand that, and that is communicated. In fact, in Scotland, a research was done by the Federation for Small Business last year, and they found that migrants in Scotland contribute 13 billion every year to the Scottish economy, and they employ 1 in 10 people in Scotland. But yet, when organizations speak about diversity, they will they will talk about diversity, and then they will say, oh, we are a very diverse organization. We have lots of women, we have disabled people, we also have transgender people, and oh, we're great, we're a great organization, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about ethnicity, it's almost like, oh right, there's ethnicity as well. And then when they perhaps realize that they're not looking good, they decide, you know what we're going to do? We're going to bring this one person. I think Fiona Matova will be great for our diversity.
Or avoiding doing business in certain minority and disadvantaged communities. And out of that work, I gained a big interest in those organizations that were working in these communities and trying to get funding out and trying to support what was going on. And so when we moved back to Scotland, I had sort of 2 arms to my career. One was just like, I'm a banker, but the other was this strong interest in a number of organizations on which I'd sat on the board or helped form over in and around the New York area that provided social, what we call social investment or social finance. In this country, it was called something different over there.
Going back to our geography, we're 180 miles away from anywhere. So nobody is going to, we don't have multiple different organisations here that, if you've got this type of need, you go to this organisation. If you've got that type of need, you go to another. We try to look at, to include as many people as we possibly can. And to do that, again, having 5 different business groups business units helps you do that. But also there are parts of each business that are very different from each other. So, for example, Shetland Soap Company is probably what we're best known for. That has a production side. That has a packaging and design side, and a development side, and it also has a retail side and an online presence. So depending on what's really important to us is to get to know the person and talk to them about what is it you want to learn, what is it you want to be part of, what excites you, what interests you in life in general. And we have a fantastic employability manager that that I've known all my working career, that I was eventually able to to get her into the organisation because I knew she'd be fabulous, and so good at being able to talk to people and understand where they might want to start off, not where we might want them to start off, but where do they want to go, what do they want to do, and then gently guide them through the options that they have within each of the business units. So very often somebody may come into one of our business units and say, I don't want to see any members of the public. That really stresses me out. I can't cope with that. I just want to be somewhere, in the background, producing something. And that's absolutely fine. But you might find if you give them the right support and the right training and the right opportunity for them to become competent and confident in themselves and in the tasks that they're doing, that you can gently move them on so that they do come out their comfort zone a little bit, and they are able to do more things than they ever thought that they would be able to do. And that's why we exist. The byproduct of what we are is beautiful hand soaps and face creams and body scrubs, and how we recycle furniture, or how we provide buffets for people, or garden centres. We do all that, but we do all of that so that people with a learning disability can go home at the end of the night and feel that they're part of something, that they're achieving something, that, you know, they're no different to anybody else. They're, you know, they're producing the highest quality goods, and we're just helping them to do that a little bit. You know, they really are doing it. And I guess that's the bit that it's for other employers. We're speaking to other employers the whole time and saying, you know, if you get the right environment and the right type of support, then anybody can achieve a lot of things. It's no different to any of us. You know, you put me in an engineering firm and say, go and weld that, you know, that bit to that bit. I would need somebody to show me, and I would need somebody to mentor me. And that's what we do.
Because Scotland had its own legal system, over the whole of those 100 years, you found Scottish legislation getting shoved to the back of the queue in Westminster. Just there wasn't enough time. And what that had meant was that in all the liberal legislation, of a liberal, I mean in a socially liberal sense, in the 1960s about the decriminalisation of homosexuality, on issues of abortion, all of the issues that we now take for granted, which were very much the product of a Labour government in the 1960s. And Donald Dewar, who became First Minister, was very much behind all of those liberal social measures. Lots and lots of them didn't happen in Scotland on the same time scale because it needed separate legislation. And so it meant if you were a gay man, women in Scotland, but gay man, you were criminalised for longer. So that was the backdrop.
Yeah.
It then became apparent to us, and maybe this small bit of history is interesting. In September 99, so 4 months after Parliament started, John Prescott, who was then the Communities Minister, my equivalent in England, made it known to us that they were going to amend Section 28 in England because it was Labour's manifesto that this, you know, heinous piece of legislation should go. Because in the Scottish Parliament, we had committed to be a different sort of parliament that listened to the people, we had a process of what was called pre-legislative scrutiny, that you talked to the community before you launched a bill in Parliament. I went to the Scottish Cabinet and I explained that if we wanted to repeal on the same timetable as Westminster, we had to start earlier. And so the choice for us was, now we have our own Parliament, do we want to be a laggard on all liberal legislation after, I mean, you know, it was a test of, do we want to be behind again?
But actually, when you sit at the table, and I've been at these tables, and I've been there invited as an expert in diversity, when you are sitting at these tables singularly, you make nearly close to zilch difference, because when you speak, nobody else knows what you're talking about. The moment you start talking, it's like you're speaking a different language sometimes. And even if they understand you, they don't necessarily understand what you're talking, that what you're saying is valuable. Because again, remember, you're not that valued. You're there to do a specific job, which is to make the company look good.
So we're going to have to be agile. We're going to have to shift and change how we live. And I think that's the space that social enterprise, the third sector, has always been in. It's been able, there's lots of innovation. That's the kind of bread and butter to social enterprise, has been to find new ways to adapt and to rebalance things. I think there's going to need to be a space for not just to recover for our communities, but to renew and reform. And I think a lot of the kind of the agenda has been shaped by people who want to reform and rethink what society is like. It's going to have, people want to have far more equal societies. We want to have much more localized economy, and we want to, I suppose, try and adapt, but to do so in a fair and equitable way. And unfortunately, the pandemic has really shown how unequal some of our society has been, and I don't think people want to go back to that. I think people want to see how we can do things differently and do things better. And I heard it was one of these podcasts that I mentioned that I like listening to. It was Stuart Cosgrove's one that he does with various different people come on and contribute. And had Val McDermid, and she was talking about how after the Second World War, that was something that touched everybody's life. And afterwards, that's when you started to have the birth of the NHS, the welfare state. So people didn't want to go back to the old ways. There had been a massive shift and change in society. And as we go forward, then we want to have something that kind of moves us into the direction that we want to head into, which is, I think, a fairer world and a fairer society, and to build on that. And I think social enterprise is well placed to deliver that and drive that forward.